I'm going to show you how I use the HPV adaptive immune response simulation in my classroom. And I teach 14 to 18-year-olds. Anatomy and physiology is usually when I use this simulation in my classroom. And HPV is one of the most common sexually transmitted diseases, and ages 14 to 18 is when many students first become sexually active. So it's important to understand HPV. Also, um, I built the simulation before COVID-19, where we heard a lot about vaccines and so forth. And that was because the Gardasil vaccine, which is a vaccine for HPV, was introduced, I think, around 2006. And I noticed there was some vaccine hesitancy in people in the community. And this simulation I built to help people understand the importance of vaccines, how they work, and how they can prevent infections. So here is the simulation. I have like a homepage of background information about incidents and so forth. Some background information about the immune system, the system dynamics model that you can kind of explore different attributes of the model, and then the simulation interface is here. So when I teach this to my students, I usually have a guided worksheet that we go through for this. So background information I have my students do. And then what I like to do at the start is before I set students loose with using the simulation, I have on my overhead the interface up for the simulation. I just have students predict the two main things we're going to track through this activity, which is the first one is predict how the HPV infection is going to change when someone's exposed, and second, predict how the concentration of antibodies will change when someone's exposed to HPV. So what I have my students do then is they draw in some kind of prediction of what they think is going to happen. Then we run the simulation. And why I like that is it helps align them to what the simulation is. So what is the boundary of the simulation? What is the scale of the simulation? Because no matter what they draw here for a prediction, it's going to be different than the actual results of the simulation. So it's a good way for us to align their mental model of what's happening versus the model of the simulation. Okay, and I can just, let me do that for you so we can align your mental model with my model of simulation. So let's see here. So here is the interface. So if we have some kind of HPV infection, how is the antibodies going to change over time, and how is the HPV infection going to change over time? And what I do with my students is, so we're looking at days, and we can run the simulation. Let's try that again. Okay, and there we go. So HPV infection increases and then decreases. Likewise, the amount of antibodies starts off low, ramps up, and then decreases over time. I have some other tabs in the simulation, like you can run comparative runs of HPV infections and antibodies. And these are down here are the cells of the immune system. So how do memory B cells change, B cells, and so forth. Okay, so then what I do is after I have situated students to how the simulation behaves, I'll have them reset the simulation, do a series of different kind of controlled experiments. So run the simulation with and without an HPV infection, and then reset the simulation. So let's do these first two together and I'll show you. And then run the simulation with an HPV infection and with and without a prior vaccination. So in the first one, we're just seeing, all right, so how does an HPV infection cause the simulation to run? So there's with it, and here is without. So with the infection, the HPV rises, and antibodies rise afterwards. And unless this is an immune response, without an infection, nothing happens. Now we'll reset this. And now here is it, HPV infection. But now let's do a prior vaccination with Gardasil. That's the vaccine produced to prevent HPV. And here we get a difference. So this becomes a great conversation. I have students explain their own thinking, but there's a couple things I would like to point out to you. Let's see here. Let me go first to, so you can look at the infection here between the two. So here, should be illuminating. The first run without the vaccine, well, the infection rose high, which could spread all over the body and cause a lot of damage. And the second one, the person still got the virus and the virus reproduced. It didn't prevent zero reproduction of the virus. It just limited it so much that you didn't see any symptoms as a result of that. And that's okay. You didn't get warts or whatever. So without the vaccine though, it can cause large spread disease. Secondly, let's go to the antibody comparison. So here, in the first run, well, it actually did make a lot of antibodies, and I don't know if this part is actually accurate, but it made a lot of antibodies, and then it decreased. But in the second one, you didn't actually have to make as many antibodies because you destroyed the viruses before they had an opportunity to become widespread. And take a look here. That's because the stock of antibodies started off already high. And the reason that is that I tell students is because, let's go down here, the memory B cells here, they started off already high. And that's really what vaccines, I tell my students what vaccines are doing is they're building up those memory B cells that are stored in the bone marrow. So when you do get in an infection, there already is a large reservoir or stock of them, which your memory B cells are the cells that are going to end up producing antibodies by differentiating into plasma cells. Okay, so a little technical there, but let's go to the next set of questions. So that's really why vaccines are important. And let's look at what vaccines aren't doing. So here, so you're gonna give an infection and, we already did that. So let's do this one here, number 10. We have with and without vaccinate with Gardasil. So what this difference is in this one, we reset normal conditions, but now if we vaccinate with Gardasil. That's just saying, all right, let's give them an infection and the vaccine at the same time. And really, we aren't seeing a difference because the vaccine is taking time, just like an infection takes time to elicit the immune response. All right, then what we have is I have students design other experiments that they can test. And in the simulation, there are a number of different factors they can manipulate. So they can manipulate antibody transcription. They can manipulate, well, what happens if we reduce B cell recognition, which I like, because this shows why do people respond differently to diseases. Some people may have large or a small B cell recognition of a particular antigen, and some people might recognize a particular antigen very well, and that will cause their immune system to respond more quickly. All right, and then lastly, I'll give students kind of the system dynamics model without the connectors connecting the different subsystems of the different cells of the immune system here. And I have them draw in how one stock affects different parts like this or like this and something like that. So there we go. And lastly, sorry, that wasn't lastly, I have them pick out, are these positive or negative feedback loops? And actually, this is the one that I have them do. HPV and antibodies. So here, HPV increases the antibodies, and antibodies decrease HPV, showing them that negative feedback loop. So this is how I use this to help teach my students about the importance of vaccines using a system dynamics model. Thanks. I will post a link to the activity sheet for you.